Well, welcome to a brand new week here on pjnet.tv. I'm Coach Prasick, hoping that you and your family had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we're just wrapping up the month of November, and we're going to go out with a bang. Every night this week, we have a first time guest, and we are going to start out tonight with first time guest number 338. Now, while I'm thinking of that, I had a little problem, or we had a little problem early on, and it has been corrected, but I still have some adjustments to make here. So I want to introduce, when I finally get everything ready, I'll make some adjustments on the fly as we're doing this, I guess. Thea Coker is joining us tonight, and she is from my great state. In fact, not even too far down the road. And Thea, it's so good that I see that your house is already decorated for Christmas. How long has it been that way?
My plan was to get it done before Thanksgiving, and I was able to do that, so I can enjoy it for a long time.
Every family seems to have a rule or a tradition about that. It's not like they just pick a random day. My
No.
wife spends the day after Thanksgiving doing. I say my wife. She always has this honey-do list of, honey, can you, she can't seem to pull it off by herself. Um, but her day is the day after Thanksgiving, but she will not turn the lights on until December 1. Yeah,
Oh,
so everything's up, but
everything's up.
but you can't turn the lights on. That would be a transgression of some
Oh,
kind for some reason. I don't know why. But it sounds to me like your Thanksgiving and Christmas is a lot bigger than ours. We have one daughter and one grandson up in Ohio. Uh,
oh,
that's it.
that's it.
So you've got me beat by quite a margin. You've got a big old family.
Yes, but they're all kids are all grown, of course, and so it's hard to get everybody together, but we try to see everybody, so I love it.
17 grandkids, you said?
Yeah, yes, we do. We have 17 grandchildren. Yes, our two youngest live in Destin, so we see them fairly often. Most of the other ones have gotten big now, but
Mm-hmm.
I love them all.
They're, they're out of the nest.
Yes.
Miss Coker, I understand that you're a pastor's wife. Is that the defining characteristic of your adulthood?
Uh, I would say so. At least my um we've been married over 30 years. So I've been a pastor's wife for over 30 years, which has been a wonderful experience to be a pastor's wife and work with people and serve the Lord in the church. And my husband's has a lot of health issues now, so we don't live that life anymore. But we have wonderful friends that we've known through the ministry, especially military, because of course Pensacola is a military town. So we have just family members all over the world, really, from people that have been to our church and that we've really loved in the ministry through the years. So
So, how many
I
Blue
miss it.
Angels shows have you been to?
Well, we live near the beach, and so we can just walk down to the end of the street and watch them, or sit out in our backyard and watch them because they fly right over our house. We're real close to the base.
Yeah,
So we've only
right.
actually gone out to the beach to see him a couple of times.
Yeah. So much for taking a nap. Um,
Yes, that is true. That is true. They're certainly loud.
and you also, a little known, everybody knows that Pensacola is home of the Blue Angels and the Navy, but very few people know that there's an Air Force Museum not too far up the road, a little bit north of you, I believe in Milton or somewhere like that. Have you ever been to that?
I don't think I've been there. I've heard that, but I haven't been to that one, I don't think.
Oh, it's a marvelous thing.
Hmm.
I, you you've lived there 30. Um, Everybody has, I guess, a preconceived notion about what it's like to be a pastor's wife. Maybe we ought to get an authoritative opinion. What's the best? What's some of the good things?
Well, some of the wonderful things is you're married to a pastor. So, you're your life with a pastor can be very, very wonderful because you're both on the same page and you're praying together and you're serving the Lord together. And that part is wonderful. But nobody's perfect and no churches are perfect. And so um, there's a lot of lessons that you have to learn, and your prayer life needs to be real deep. But it's wonderful, when you see people come to the Lord and then you see them grow and you disciple people and have people in your home, it's wonderful. We have wonderful memories of that time in our life.
Well, I wonder about some of the conversations. Has anybody slipped up and criticized the pastor and then realized you were
Yes, that does happen. That does happen. But, you just have to smile and take it to the Lord.
I hear you. Hey, I'm getting a message from our next guest. He's changing the topics. Oh, great. Okay. All right. So tell us the worst experience you've had as a pastor's wife.
Oh my goodness gracious. I hadn't even
Trying to
thought of that.
decide of which one.
No. I probably the fact that it's like if you're married to a physician, a lot of times your life is not really your own, and I think probably that's the truth if you're married to a pastor, because you're kind of on call 24/7. And so as long as I think the pastor and the pastor's wife are both on the same page, then you're serving the Lord. But sometimes it is hard when you have plans and other things happen, or the Lord's work has to come first and should come first. But I,
Well,
I actually missed that life. I
oh yeah.
loved it. Yes, I did.
So give your husband a grade as a pastor in terms of prioritizing family and church.
Well, he always put the Lord first, and then he would put, I would think, me, and then his family, and then the church family.
That's a strain. It's sort of like well, it's not sort of like. There's no comparing, but I'm trying to think of like first responders, law enforcement, firemen, things
Hmm.
like that. They have chosen a profession. Now I know some pastors that when they married, I'm thinking of one particular individual, but I think he represents others. When he got married, he was not a pastor. He had no calling to the ministry. His calling to the ministry came later in
Hmm.
their marriage, and their marriage actually fell apart because he was a very well. He was a politician. He was a member of Congress here in the state of Florida,
Hmm.
and his wife, frankly, I mean, that was when he left that behind to go into the ministry. Well, that was a substantial cut in pay, okay, and
Yeah.
a substantial cut in the social. Some of the things that he once did were kind of off the radar. Well, his wife up and left him. She said, "I didn't sign up for this," but you didn't have that problem because you
No,
signed up
no.
for it.
I signed up for it. Yes, he was a pastor. Uh, First time I ever heard him speak, he was preaching. So I didn't really understand what the role was, but I just felt like that's I knew that I loved the Lord and I wanted to serve the Lord, and so we've had a wonderful life together serving the Lord.
I would
I'm
think that
grateful.
being a pastor's wife would open up a lot of doors for speaking, especially in women's groups.
Yes, and I think there's a real need for that. Women need other women. The Bible tells us that in Titus. And so it's a very important role to have uh, spiritual mentors, women that you can talk to and that you can get good biblical counsel from. And I think women really need to be around other women. And I think it's great when your church has different things that women can do to get, be around each other and have that mentoring relationship with each other.
Yeah, I would say you're right. Depending on what they do. Uh,
Right. That's true.
sometimes when women get together, I don't think that's healthy for any marriage or any relationship, to tell you the
No,
truth.
it depends if you're seeking the Lord.
So
But
you you've
Go ahead.
watched a bunch of young women become mature women. Uh, tell us a story with a good ending.
Well, I can tell you a story. I worked also at a dental office for years. And of course, I was praying for all the women that I worked with all the time. And it was amazing how the Lord brought this one girl into our office, and I started praying for her. And the Lord gave me an opportunity to witness to her. And I had invited her to church, and I didn't know if she didn't, I don't think she even liked me at that time. But anyway, she came to church and she accepted the Lord that night. And it was wonderful. She became like my daughter. She is my spiritual daughter. And we started meeting at work. The doctor that I worked for was also a Christian, and then he let us use the office to have a Bible study after work. And so we started meeting there and studying the Bible and praying. And before long, there was another one that accepted the Lord in the office. And then she started meeting, and then another one. And so I believe this is disciple making. It's pouring into the lives of other women. And we would read and pray, and it was a safe space. And then to see these women grow in their own relationship with the Lord. And of course, I don't see them very often anymore since we're retired. But it's just wonderful to see how the Lord is now using them. And that's just such a joy. I love these women.
How old was that young lady at the time?
She was probably in her 20s, maybe.
Hmm.
She, late 20s, maybe. But I worked at that same office. I worked in the dental profession for 36 years. So I've seen a lot of women come and go, and the Lord has given me a lot of opportunities to pour into other women. I'm so grateful for that.
Did it occur to you, Thea, that sharing the gospel with a coworker, is risky because you're going to have to work with them after that, and if they take offense to that, or that could turn into a very cold situation. Did you consider that?
No, I guess
Good.
I love the Lord, and I just talk about the Lord, and um, I pray a lot and I see answers to prayer. And so I just can't help but talk about it. So anyway, it never really happened that way.
Thea, I have a question.
Yes.
You sent me this picture, and
The little
I
girl.
don't, I guess you sent that for a reason, and I
Yes,
assume that there is a story here.
there is. Well, my story actually started with my parents. They, of course, went through the Depression, and life was very difficult for them. And just about the time in their life, middle age, where they thought things might be getting a little bit easier, my mom became pregnant with me, and I was not their easy child. I was born a very rebellious, strong willed little girl. And this is that little girl right there. And in my book that I wrote, there's a lot of little girl stories about this little girl. She was really a legend in her own mind, and she got herself in a lot of trouble. But my mother, both my parents were actually very godly people. I went to church my entire life, knew all the right words to say, but I was not saved. And but my mother never quit praying for me. And so eventually, after I moved away from home, the Lord tracked me down, and thank you, Jesus, He saved me, and I'm so grateful. But this little girl still was had a lot to learn, even as a Christian. And my life was not very easy. And my mother eventually got Alzheimer's, and we had to move her into a facility. Well, we were cleaning out the house and going through stuff in the attic, and I found this big, large cardboard box. And when I opened it up, it had my mother's prayer journals that she had been praying for me my whole life. So for me to look into these prayer journals that my mother kept and see her pouring her heart out to prayer for this little wild child of hers was just life changing for me. And when I found those, I was already walking with the Lord at that time, but she never knew how much her life of her witness and her prayer life meant to me. In fact, in my book, there's a lot of quotes by my mother. She really was, she was the trailblazer for joy in my life for sure. And she never got involved in my drama of a life at that time. She was just always pointing me to Jesus. She said, Thea, your life is never going to change until you start your day on your knees in his word, surrendering everything to him. And I finally took her advice, and she was right. When I started getting up early, getting into his word, learning how to surrender, learning how to walk by faith, things started getting different as a Christian. I went through a lot of depression, but the Lord brought me to a greater understanding of what he says in First Thessalonians, when he says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." You know, when life is hard and you're going through a lot of trials, to 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 really give thanks is difficult. But when I started doing just that, not being a hearer of the word, but being a doer of that word, and I started just trying to stay in perpetual thank you, God, for this. I know you're in control. Little by little, joy just started bubbling up in my soul. And all that depression went away. And I just started realizing that joy in Jesus has nothing to do with our circumstances. It just has to do with what he does inside of us. He brings joy and peace and comfort, even when our circumstances are very difficult. But we have to walk by faith, and we have to trust in his promises. And he does bring good. He always brings good out of it. It might take a while, but in the meantime, we can just keep on praising the Lord. And, you know, my mother taught me that. And I'm hoping that I'm teaching other women that, because it makes all the difference in the world. The Lord is the only person, the only being that is not going to disappoint you. And too often, I think especially women, we're looking for somebody to meet all of our needs. And the Lord is the only one that can do that. And he will not disappoint us.
So your mother wrote in her prayer journal, and
Yes.
you took it up a notch and wrote a book. But of course, some of what's in the book was in your mom's prayer journal. Uh,
Yes.
let's spend a minute talking about your book.
Okay. Well, I never really intended to write a book. I just like to boast in the Lord. And these little stories, they're true stories, all of them. They would just kind of pop into my head, like people who write music say a little song comes in their head. Well, that's the way these stories. And I would write them down, and then I would read them to some of my kids, and they loved them. And so they would, then time would go by and I wouldn't write, and then another one would come to me. And so I would just kept them in a binder. And they just said, "Oh, we love these stories. Other people need to read these stories." And so one thing led to the other, and eventually more stories just would start flowing out. And it's been really exciting to see how the Lord has used this book and these little true stories, because they are my journey into joy. And it's the good, bad, and the ugly of my life, and then a lot of good things too. So people tell me that it's very encouraging, but I have a lot of, I call my little girl stories, and that is that little girl. And she was forever getting in trouble, but thankfully she had a mother that prayed for her for a long time. So if you're out there and you have a wayward child, don't ever give up praying. You know, as long as you have breath, you pray for your children. You don't know what God has in store for them.
Amazing. How many stories are in this book? How many chapters?
52 in this one. So you could actually, I wrote it one, you could read one a week. And then I'm almost finished with my second book. It's probably just about 30 stories. Um, but I read it myself to myself if I'm having a bad day. So there's a lot of funny things in there, and there's a lot of encouraging words, and a lot about my sweet little mother. she'll never know. Like I said, she had Alzheimer's, and my dad died when I was younger. He was a believer too, but neither one of my parents really ever really knew how much they influenced my life. I'm so grateful.
I think they actually do now. But,
Well, they
well,
probably do.
okay. Thea, what a wonderful
Yes,
story.
thank you.
And what a sweet spirit that you bring to the program and to all that you uh, impact in your day to day life. And we certainly appreciate you sharing with us tonight. And I hope
Thank
that
you.
you will continue to serve in ministry even though you're retired. Sounds like that's what you're doing. I don't think God's done with you yet, Thea.
Well, I hope not. I don't think so either. Thank you so much.
All right, glad to have you. Thea
Okay.
Coker here on pjnet.tv. What a sweet spirit. Gosh, we need more of that, don't we? Well, the bottom of the hour, in just a few minutes, we've got Casper. He's going to visit us from the great state of Colorado, as he always does on Monday night. I have plenty of work to do between now and then. I don't know if you do or not. So I'll suggest an assignment in case you don't have anything to do. Or even if you do have something to do, maybe you would prioritize this. It's helped me. So I'll share it with you. I ask myself two questions frequently. I don't want to say daily, but pretty close. First question. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? Sometimes you have to think a little while, you know? Second question. When was that? See, the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.